I've been playing competitive Pokemon for a long time now, but I've never actually entered a tournament of any kind. It's been years since I was super active playing it, but now it's often relegated to a brief spurt of interest after watching a tournament live or seeing a player pop off and being like, man, I want to play that game now too. It's very easy for me to get invested in competitive sports, especially with video game ones, but with Pokemon and most other games that I've tried, once the initial hype fades, it just falls to the wayside like many other competitive games that I've tried and just fallen out of. However, with Scarlet and Violet, I tried to be more consistently involved in the competitive side of the game. I boot up Pokemon Showdown a little bit more frequently just to play around with teams. It's helped a lot with Regulation F, where it feels like every 2 days something changes drastically. I've just been coming up with random team ideas, but it's been fun to play around with all these weird ideas I have. And then I heard about the global competition being held in early February. A fully online tournament that I can play at my own time was very appealing and seemed like a simple entry point for me to try my hand at seeing how good I am. So I locked myself in with a team of Wo-Chien, Overquill, Fluttermane, Dragonite, Torkoal, and Walking Away. To break down the team, first let's get the easy three out of the way. Fluttermane, rocking the traditional Focus Sash, Dazzling Gleam, Moonblast, Shadow Ball, Protect, Terra Fairy set. Dragonite was running Choice Band, Terra Normal, Extreme Speed with Earthquake, Ice Spinner, and Iron Head. And then Torkoal was running Choice Specs, Terra Fire, Eruption, Solar Beam, Earth Power, and Sludge Bomb. As for the other three, they were more unique choices, but also Pokemon I thought would do pretty well against some of the big threats at the time. Walking Wake was running Assault Vest, Terra Water Scald, Hydro Pump, Flamethrower, and Snarl. Wo-Chien was running Terra Steel Expert Belt with Dark Pulse, Giga Drain, Reflect, and Taunt. And then lastly, we have Overquill, who on paper seemed like a really good matchup against the Expanding Force spam, which seemed like it was everywhere at the time. He was running Leftovers Terra Dark with Waterfall, because I couldn't get Aqua Jet to transfer, even though it's an egg move. And Bar Barrage, Crunch, and Poison Jab. The main driver on this team was countering Psychic Terrain Expanding Force spam, which was just everywhere when I was making the team. And then I added the Sun aspect with Torkoal because I wanted some answers to Rain Dance, Tailwind Tornadus, and the other weather setters. Wo-Chien was meant to be the balanced coverage for Expanding Force, and Urshifu Rapid Strike, just spamming Terra Water Surging Strikes. Overquill, on the other hand, was mostly there to seemingly check Fluttermane, but mostly to block Expanding Force from landing, and did that all of once. So my assumption is he's pulling up with that Expanding Force now. Water. That actually is still fine. That's just hanging out. Literally chilling. But without further ado, let's talk about how I actually did in the tournament. And the answer is bad. But that's also what I expected. The footage you're about to see is from the first 15 battles. I streamed them all live on twitch.tv/Hagita, where I'm trying to stream at least once a week. I didn't stream the second batch of battles because I was running short on time and just wanted to crank them out. You aren't missing any of the important that I won't cover as we get into it. The global competition itself was broken up into 2 days, with each day allowing you to do 15 battles per day, all in a best of 1 format. Overall, I ended up with 25, but we'll get to why I didn't finish the last 5 later. Day 1 started on a rough note with a loss due to not having an answer to Trick Room Ursaluna with Hyper Voice and Priority Grassy Glide from Rillaboom. It was a closer match, but ultimately my team lacked the bulk and offensive presence to get Ursaluna off the field before it just tore through my team. Second match went much better as I managed the team well to end off with a 2v1 sun-boosted Hydro Steam and Eruption. Admittedly, my opponent made some questionable plays, but a win is a win. The biggest weakness I saw here is that Dragonite being choice banded locked it into Ice Spinner, which was not a move I wanted to use for the situation, nor was it the best one. The third match, however, unlocked a new Pokemon I had no experience with. That was Regidrago. My last exposure to him was seeing him as a niche pick in some tournaments, but once I stared him down, I became well aware as to why he was a great pick for a best of one tournament. The Regidrago has this move called Dragon Energy, which is basically just Dragon type Eruption, where the more HP Regidrago has, the stronger the move will be. I didn't know this move existed before this tournament because I skipped the DLC in Sword and Shield because it didn't really interest me. And while I was laddering, I never ran into a single Regidrago. So needless to say, it wiped my entire team because it was full health and I didn't know it had a move that could take out my entire team. Which, in hindsight, I definitely should have practiced more because I imagine I probably would have run into at least one Regidrago. The fourth match is one that's a peak example of the kind of things you find in a best of one global competition, where it was a pledge team, which is a combo I have literally never fought against because it is incredibly niche. But then I got the combo water and grass pledge and suddenly my speed was dropped by 75% and their team outsped and just ran through my entire team. The fifth match allowed me to use the Sun mode of the team to full effect since I was facing a Politoed Archaludon Rain team. I actually played really well here to take the win because I felt like I was doing really well pivoting Torkoal in and out to make sure my opponent didn't have the chance to make use of the Rain. It was a much slower paced game since Archaludon was very buffed from stamina, but I was able to whittle it down with a burn and some chip damage until Watermain could finally deal the final blow. My next match was another loss, but this time due to a Lucario that just hit a lot harder than I expected, and then Dragonite being locked into extreme speed while being debuffed, and then Torkoal being locked into an Eruption against Incineroar while being at low health and as such doing no damage. Regidrago returned for the next match and did the exact same it did last time and swept my last two Pokemon Dragon Energy. The match after that was a much slower crawl to victory, but it was a victory because ultimately Fluttermane is very fast and hits very hard. The next match was another win, but only because my opponent saw Walking Wake with his Rillaboom, and instead of using the priority Grassy Glide, they went for Woodhammer and took themselves out while Walking Wake lived and then just cleared the rest of his team. The match after that reintroduced me to one of my new favorite Pokemon, that is Glimmora. It came and it conquered my team by just hitting super hard, but also I just got out-predicted like every turn. I felt genuinely outplayed, but it was by one of my favorite new Pokemon, so I'm like, I'm okay with this. I also brought Overqwil to this match, and it did nothing except come onto the field and get Earth-powered by Glimmora and immediately die. My next opponent was rocking an interesting team with Rockhead, Hisuian Arcanine, and several other Mons that didn't really fit together, but it was a team. It was a pretty easy match that Fluttermane and Walking Wake just outsped their entire team and swept through everything. As I entered the final stretch of the battles, I fought one of my better matches against a Trick Room Psychic Terrain team. I did a good job managing the damage output of the team on both ends, where I was keeping the opposing team from doing too much damage and then also dealing more damage on my end to keep myself in the winning position. The deciding factor was ultimately that I had taken the opposing Alcremie's special attack low enough that it couldn't get the kill before I could retaliate with the Hydros team from Walking Wake to take them out. The next match was another win due to Wo-Chien resisting my opponent's every move and me being good at making predictions to stop this sucker punching King Gambit and an Ogerpon that was dead set on taking out my Fluttermane. So instead, Wo-Chien just took care of both. The second to last match was another loss due to Ursaluna Blood Moon putting in a lot of pressure and a Terra Fairy Frigoraph hitting very hard with Dazzling Gleam and neutering my Torkoal's offensive presence before it could just clean up the rest. The final match of day one was another Expanding Force spam team, but this time they had Terra Dark Iron Crown, which caught me off guard and then just shut down my entire team from getting anything going. So ultimately I ended day one with 7 wins and 8 losses, which in hindsight I should have just skipped the second day of battles, because I proceeded to lose all 10 battles I did in day 2. A good number were close, but it was on day 2 where the problems on my team kind of crystallized, and you can pick up a few from how I've talked about certain matches, but now let me really break down what I think worked and what didn't work for this team. I think the biggest strength of this team was Fluttermane, Walking Wake, and Wo-Chien. This Fire, Water, Grass core were easily my most used trio. However, I think Wo-Chien feeds into one of the large problems with this team, which is that once my opponent gets rid of Walking Wake and Flutter Mane, or sometimes just Flutter Mane, the team runs into the problem of lacking a real strong offensive presence. Wo-Chien's bulky and can win battles, but most of the battles in the competitions were not wars of attrition. It was a really strong Pokemon just coming in and knocking something out. Wo-Chien still does well against certain Pokemon, but against things like Overpowered Water or Iron Crown, he just kind of chipped away at them. And I think the team really needed another heavy hitter that could just pull up and take something off the field, like Flutter Mane, but in addition to Flutter Mane instead. Dragonite was meant to fill this role, but having the choice been often felt like I was very quickly locked into a suboptimal move. He could still put damage on the board, but it was rarely quick KOs and instead was just taking chunks at a Pokemon before going down. I think ultimately if I had to keep the two, I would probably lean Wo-Chien into more offense and swap Reflect for something like Terra Steel, Terra Blast, if only just to give him a little more coverage. Dark Grass seemed like pretty good coverage, and then I ran into like 2 Urshifu Rapid Strike in the entire tournament, and then a ton of the single strike ones, who Wo-Chien just has no way of dealing meaningful damage into. But we can't forget about Overquill. There isn't really much to talk about because he did much of nothing. The few matches I brought him to, he was just kind of dead weight. He was a Pokemon that seemed good on paper and did okay when I practiced them on Pokemon Showdown, but in the event was just useless. I probably could have just brought an Ursaluna or an Urshifu and just made my life infinitely easier. So overall for the team, I think I'll keep Torkoal, Walking Wake, and Flutter Mane. Wo-Chien I'd kind of temporarily keep, but if I can find a guy who does his role better, I'll probably switch him out. But Overquill and Dragonite are just off the team, probably being replaced by Urshifu and I imagine Ogerpon, just because they have a better offensive presence and are more able to keep the foot on the gas instead of being forced into playing the defensive until I hopefully clutch out a win. Another thing I'd probably do is spend more time Pokemon Showdown laddering with the team. I still ran probably 50 to 60 matches over the course of like the few weeks before the tournament, but I probably should have been more attentive and intentional about like learning from those matches. From them I had a decent idea of several key Pokemon matchups and stuff like that that helped me in the tournament, but I think more hours would help cement them into my memory while also exposing me to more niche stuff so that I'd know what things like Regidrago do before I am just wiped by them. Because ultimately there are some Pokemon that don't change that much, but Regulation F added a lot of new team compositions that I definitely will need to study more. Overall, I don't really regret entering and participating in the tournament, even if I did fairly badly. It was fun building the team and feeling some semblance of competitive pressure, even if I knew full well I was not going to be placing very well in the competition. I think I'll probably enter the next few, but I'm okay with competitive Pokemon being a kind of hobby and just popping in for these couple things. But I'm glad I tried my hand at an actual competition, even if it is very low stakes. I didn't place anywhere close to well, but I at least gave it a shot, and I think that's what matters. Now I can go back and refine the team, get better equipped for the next round. And as my favorite manga of all time, Haikyuu, taught me, a loss is just practice to improve. All the defeats are places I can learn from and become a better player next time. Because the question that always lingers is, what will you become tomorrow?